There's a story that circulates about the Wichita Mountains of Oklahoma, claiming the Kiowa people warned early settlers about something sealed deep beneath those granite peaks. Some versions describe a buried force. Some describe an ancient warning against digging in specific canyons. Some claim entire areas of the mountains were considered forbidden because of what Kiowa elders reportedly said was trapped underground. Before we go any further, here's the honest starting point for this investigation. Much of what circulates under the label Kiowa legend cannot be traced to any documented tribal source at all. So what's actually real here? And what happens when a nation's true, well-documented history gets flattened into a vague warning story that doesn't hold up to real scrutiny? This is a story about separating fact from fabrication, and about a landscape and a people who both deserved to be understood accurately. Let's start with the mountains themselves, because the Wichita Mountains are genuinely remarkable geologic formations, independent of any legend attached to them. Located in southwestern Oklahoma, the Wichita Mountains are among the oldest exposed mountain ranges in North America, formed from granite that pushed up through the Earth's crust roughly 500 million years ago, making them significantly older than the Rocky Mountains. Unlike many mountain ranges shaped primarily by tectonic collision, the Wichitas are the eroded remnants of an ancient igneous intrusion. Their rounded granite peaks and boulder-strewn slopes, the product of hundreds of millions of years of weathering. Today, much of this range sits within the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge, a federally managed area established in 1901, making it one of the oldest managed wildlife areas in the country. This landscape carries an extraordinarily long human history. Archaeological evidence confirms human presence in the southern plains region surrounding the Wichita Mountains for many thousands of years, with successive indigenous cultures making use of this area's resources, water sources, and defensible terrain, long before the more historically documented arrival of the Kiowa people in this specific region. The Kiowa tribe's own well-documented history describes a significant migration, moving from the northern plains in the region of present-day Montana, southward over the course of the 18th century, eventually forming a close and enduring alliance with the Comanche Nation and establishing themselves across the southern plains, including present-day Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico by the early 19th century. This is well-documented tribal and academic history, not speculation, and it represents an extraordinary story of migration, adaptation, and alliance building in its own right. It's essential to state this plainly and with genuine respect. The Kiowa Tribe is a federally recognized, living sovereign nation today, headquartered in Oklahoma, with a rich, extensively documented culture that includes sophisticated warrior societies, a renowned pictographic calendar keeping known as winter counts, which tribal historians have used to document Kiowa year by year across generations, and deep spiritual traditions to specific significant sites across their historical territory, including the Wichita Mountains themselves. So where does the specific idea of something sealed beneath the Wichita Mountains actually come from? This is where responsible investigation has to slow down considerably, because the sourcing here is genuinely thin compared to how confidently this story circulates online. A significant portion of what appears online describes warnings about something buried beneath these mountains, not to any documented cultural source, but to a broader, well-established pattern in Aboriginal folklore. Vague, unattributed Indian stories that developed extensively across frontier-era settler communities throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, later amplified by intet error, retelling with even less connection to verifiable sourcing. This pattern deserves direct, honest naming because it matters. When a story attributes a specific, dramatic warning, something dangerous, something forbidden, to the Kiowa broadly, without citing any specific elder, any specific documented winter count entry, any specific ethnographic record, or any actual collaboration with the Kiowa tribe itself, that absence of sourcing should raise genuine skepticism. This doesn't necessarily reflect deliberate deception. Often it reflects generations of casual, uncritical retelling, where a story that started as vague settler folklore gradually accumulated borrowed authority simply through repetition. That doesn't mean Kiowa oral tradition lacks genuine teachings about specific significant sites. Indigenous oral traditions across the Southern Plains, including documented Kiowa traditions specifically, do include real, culturally significant knowledge about particular locations tied to migration history, spiritual practice, and historical memory, some of it connected to the Wichita Mountains region, given the tribe's documented historical presence there. But the specific, sensationalized, something sealed the mountains version circulating today cannot be traced to any specific documented Kiowa source, and appears to owe considerably more to generic frontier legend convention than to authentic tribal testimony. So let's actually examine what's documented carefully and see where genuine evidence actually leads us. Archaeological and historical research throughout the Wichita Mountains region, including Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge and various university survey projects over the past century, has confirmed extensive evidence of long-term indigenous use of this landscape, including rock shelter sites, evidence of hunting camps taking advantage of the area's once abundant bison population, and material culture reflecting thousands of years of successive habitation by multiple distinct peoples before alongside Kiowa presence in the region. This is where the real, documented history becomes genuinely compelling without needing any invented warning story at all. The Kiowa's documented alliance with the Comanche, formed in the early 19th century following a period of earlier conflict between the two nations, created the most formidable and historically significant indigenous military and political partnerships on the southern plains, controlling vast territory and shaping the region's history for decades before increasing pressure from American expansion led to the reservation era. Kiowa winter counts, several of which have been preserved by historians, anthropologists, document this period year by year through pictographic records created by tribal historians, offering a genuinely rare and valuable indigenous authored historical record spanning multiple generations. When we ask what the Kiowa specifically knew or taught about the Wichita Mountains themselves, the honest, historically grounded answer requires real humility from outside observers. Specific cultural, spiritual, or historical knowledge about particular sites within this range, where such knowledge exists, belongs to the Kiowa tribe and is properly interpreted by their own cultural authorities and community members today, not speculated upon or dramatized by outside documentarians seeking an engaging story. If you appreciate history told with real care, even when that means gently correcting a popular but poorly sourced legend, this channel exists exactly for that kind of investigation. Subscribe now, because tracing where this specific sealed story actually originated leads somewhere considerably more revealing than the legend itself ever promised. So let's talk directly about the documented, or rather undocumented, origins of this specific, sealed beneath the mountains folklore, because tracing it honestly, genuinely matters here. A considerable amount of American folklore, sealed beneath specific landscapes, loosely attached to various indigenous nations across many different states, appears to follow a recognizable pattern in original storytelling, one that often but real concept of indigenous sacred geography, genuinely documented into actual traditions, and repackages it into a more sensational, considerably less accurate narrative in hidden danger, buried forces, or forbidden knowledge, a framing that tends to say more about settler society and imagination than about actual documented indigenous belief. No credible academic institution and no publicly available Kiowa Tribe cultural or historical resource has confirmed any documented tradition describing something specifically sealed beneath the Wichita Mountains as popularly depicted in circulating online versions of this story. The Kiowa tribe's own historical and cultural information, shared through official tribal channels and reflected in serious ethnographic work conducted in careful collaboration with tribal historians over the past century, focuses appropriately on their extensively documented history. Their northern plains origins, their 18th century migration south, their alliance with the Comanche, their winter count tradition, and their documented, often painful history through the reservation era following the Medicine Lodge Treaty of 1867. There's also a straightforward, unglamorous explanation for why the Wichita Mountains have accumulated so much local mystery and independent of any specific legend at all. This is a genuinely striking, boulder-strewn landscape, visually dramatic enough to naturally generate the kind of atmospherical storytelling that develops around distinctive natural landmarks throughout rural America, entirely without requiring any specific documented indigenous source to explain why people find it evocative. There's a connection worth drawing carefully here between two genuinely separate threads of evidence, without overstating what either proves. On one side, we have extensively confirmed, professionally documented evidence of long-term indigenous presence and land use throughout the Wichita Mountains region, along with the Kiowa tribe's own well-documented, remarkable history of migration, alliance, and cultural achievement across the southern plains. On the other side, we have a widely circulated but unverifiable, sealed beneath the mountains legend, loosely attributed to Kiowa tradition without any documented tribal source, that more accurately traces to broader, unrelated American folklore patterns involving vague, unattributed Indian warning stories common across many regions of the country. These threads are not the same story, and combining them, as much popular content unfortunately does a genuine disservice to the real, extraordinary, well-documented history that actually exists and deserves to be told accurately. But examined honestly and separately, they point towards something true. The Wichita Mountains region holds a genuinely deep, layered human history, considerably more compelling in its real, documented form than any invented sealed force has ever managed to be. So where does this investigation actually leave us? The most responsible conclusion available, based on everything genuinely verifiable, is this. Something sealed beneath the Wichita Mountains legend, as it circulates online and is loosely attributed to Kiowa tradition, cannot be traced to any documented tribal source, and is better understood as a variant of broader, unattributed frontier folklore than as authentic Kiowa oral history. What is genuinely, powerfully true is considerably more significant than the legend itself. The Kiowa people, a documented, remarkable history spanning their northern plains origins, their 18th century migration south, their formidable alliance with the Comanche Nation, their sophisticated winter count historical record, and their resilience through a difficult, well-documented period of forced treaty and reservation history, maintaining their identity and sovereignty as a nation into the present day. Their real history, extensively documented and available through their own tribal resources, doesn't require an invented warning story to be worth learning about carefully. Maybe the real question this investigation raises isn't what's sealed beneath those mountains. Maybe it's this. How often does a genuinely remarkable, well-documented Indigenous history get quietly overshadowed by a vaguer, more sensational story, simply because the sensational version required far less actual research to tell, and travels considerably faster online than the real one ever could? The Wichita Mountains don't need an invented sealed force to be worth understanding carefully and respectfully. Their real story, hundreds of millions of years of geological history layered beneath thousands of years of documented human presence, including the genuinely remarkable Kiowa connected to this exact landscape, was always the more compelling one, and it deserves to be told with the depth and accuracy it has earned. What do you think it says about how regional legends spread when a story attributed to a specific nation's tradition turns out, on closer investigation, to trace back to something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you appreciate history told carefully, even when that means setting aside a popular story, go ahead and subscribe for more honestly researched deep dives into the past.